Hello, everyone. I did a little introduction, but I'll do that again. My name is Demar Prowlis-Long, and I'm one of the HSIL Subwork grant managers on the DFW side of the team. And thank you all for being here today. It's a small group, but I think small but mighty. We'll have a great conversation today. During this session, Puget Sound restoration practitioners are going to share their HSIL-funded projects, which have supported their ability to accelerate project implementation and address barriers in their work in different ways, such as identifying pathways for permit streamlining, creating spaces to convene partners to further coordinate effort and have coordination effort, and implementing feasibility studies for integrative projects addressing multiple stressors. And outcomes of these projects are all aligned with all of our 4 habitat implementation strategies, which you can find on our program today. And today, my first presenter I'm going to present is Jonathan from EarthCorps. So I'll have you come on up.
Hello, my name is Johnny Belici. I'm with EarthCorps, and this is our grant with the HSIL grant, increasing EarthCorps' capacity for restoration in the Puget Sound region. So this project, little project overview, this project seeks to enhance EarthCorps' ability to deliver essential ecological restoration planning services, such as habitat monitoring, data collection and research, and mapping of vital habitats by creating and funding a new restoration ecologist position. So the time frame of this grant, it goes from June of 2025 to July of 2027, and it funds my position as a new restoration ecologist, and allows EarthCorps to provide ecological planning services through a co-design framework. And if you're not familiar, a co-design framework is a collaborative approach that centers community voices and knowledge in shaping solutions. It brings together community members, especially those most impacted by environmental injustices, as equal partners to identify challenges, develop and implement solutions. So some of the main goals for this for the grant are to increase EarthCorps' capacity to deliver ecological restoration planning services through consultation, design, implementation, strengthen and expand partnerships with our project partners to enhance ecological resilience, promote environmental justice, and support long-term stewardship of restored lands. And some key objectives and outcomes are to develop restoration plans with coalition members and new partners. And then these plans would then be ready for our partners as well as EarthCorps to seek support for implementation, conduct monitoring and evaluation, expand partnerships, and enhance regional collaboration. So here are some of our project partners. You can see here we have project partners in Skagit County, Snohomish County, King County, and Pierce County, with a concentration of most of our project partners are in King County in the lower Duwamish area. You can see here it's a mix of different nonprofits, tribal groups, and city and entities. So here are some of our completed projects so far. We have Yes Farm and Forest Urban Farm Conservation Plan with Black Farmers Collective, Tubman Center for Health and Freedom Slope Management Plan, as well as City of Tukwila Park Scale Analysis. These restoration plans generally include non-Indigenous species identification and mapping, creation and mapping of habitat management units, assessments of habitat health and vulnerability to climate change, and then stewardship recommendations based on non-Indigenous species present on site and what is really needed at that site. You can see here on the on your guys' right, here is a example. We have the site mapped with non-Indigenous species, the trees with ivy rings, things like that. And then a little project highlight we have here is Yes Farm and Forest Urban Farm Conservation Plan with Black Farmers Collective. The map on the left shows the urban farm in the Yester neighborhood of Seattle with mapped land uses and split into management areas. The map on the right is the future land use community input map. So EarthCorps and Black Farmers Collective walked through the site and identified areas that could be utilized for conservation or community space. And then we recommended conservation additions and gathered community input for what the community would like to see happen in these spaces. So here are some of our upcoming projects and ongoing projects that should be finished here in the next few weeks. We have the Outer High Levels Restoration Action Plan with the Puyallup Tribe. We have the Wapato Hills Gary Oak Prairie Restoration Plan with the Pierce Conservation District. And then Southgate Park Conifer Survival and Non-Indigenous Tree Treatment Monitoring Report, which happened, the planting of these trees happened last year with our crews. And now we went through, we mapped all the surviving trees, and then we'll monitor the non-indigenous tree species that survived treatment as well. But this map here shows the habitat management units for Southgate Park, as well as the indigenous conifer trees that were planted and survived. So some upcoming projects starting in Q2 are the Cumberland Creek Forest Management Plan and Savage Slough Monitoring Plan with Skagit River System Cooperative. Place of Circling Water Shiny Geranium and Poison Hemlock Treatment Monitoring and with the Port of Tacoma, and then the gap analysis of the Duwamish River tributaries with King County Department of Natural Resources and Parks. Thank you all, and if you have any questions or want to talk about any of this, come find me at some point.
Thank you, Johnny. And up next, we have Daniel and Kate from Green River Coalition speaking about their restoration staff support project.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Daniel Schultz. I'm the operations manager for the Green River Coalition. This is my colleague, Kate Kuski, who's our lead field staff. I do the behind the scenes work, and they are on the field or out in the field, making sure that everything is happening. So our HSIL grant is a capacity building grant where we've been able to go from 3 employees to now 8 employees. And this particular grant encompasses 3 different sites that we have been working on. We're going to talk about 2 of them today. One of which our Cascade Watershed Alliance site is something that we have worked on with some county funds before. However, we were able to get additional funding through the state. The other 2 sites that we will be talking about is the phase 2 of our Palmer Slough site and our WDFW boat launch site. One of which we have been working on, the other is still, we have assessed, but we haven't been able to break ground due to cultural resources reviews that should be done momentarily, anytime at this point. But I'm going to give it to Kate to talk about our Palmer Slough phase 2 site. And here we go.
Quickly, before I get into that, I want to acknowledge some of our partners, because all of us know that we cannot do this work successfully without partners. So we do a lot of work with Orca Conservancy, and we also do a lot of work with a group called Unleash the Brilliance that works with young people and educating them on both the environment as well as kind of leadership training. Now, jumping into Palmer Slough phase 2, you'll see on this map, we already have a phase 1. That is under different funding, so I won't spend a lot of time on that, but it is located on Green River Mile 58, just downstream of the Howard Hudson Dam. There is a small little stream that kind of connects phase 2 to phase 1. So we started at phase 1, we're moving up into phase 2. It is approximately 1.2 acres. Main challenges over here are we are located in kind of a wind corridor. So even if the forecast says things are totally clear to get out there, sometimes we get out there and it's just a little too dangerous. There are a lot of dead trees, standing deadwood. We're talking like high numbers of deciduous that are kind of aged out. So it's something that we have to constantly be thinking of when we're out there. The other main challenge of this site is that the banks are very steep. And actually that was somewhat by design. This area was worked on by the Army Corps of Engineers probably about 40 to 50 years ago. And so the bank is actually like really rocky engineered. So we're kind of working with that challenge. We have, although discovered, there is what we call the shelf up above that, which I'll kind of point out here on the next slide. But, you know, in terms of vegetative cover, you know, there's the upper story is kind of dying out. We want to replace that. The mid story is pretty much like blackberry, blackberry, blackberry with some natives kind of hiding underneath. So far, what we have done is we have removed about probably a little bit more than what I have up here, because we've done some work since I made these slides. But approximately 2,600 square feet of blackberry. We've installed over 200 willow stakes and outplanted about 25 conifer saplings with little ferns as their friends. I really wanted to get you guys a better picture of actual plantings, but we had to postpone due to snow. So we'll be getting out there in the next couple of weeks to install several hundred plants, kind of mid-story native shrubs, and more conifers that hopefully will survive long enough to become nice tall trees to provide that vital shade. Here's the picture where I wanted to show you all the things we planted, but because we had to postpone that, this is one of the planting zones that we are planning on installing a lot more good species. And of course, our goal is to bring in more community with volunteers, as well as those partners that I already mentioned. So that is kind of what we're planning moving forward. And then we're going to touch briefly on our newer site, the boat launch, which, as Daniel mentioned, we've kind of had to stall a little bit because we're going through those cultural reviews. But him and I were able to get out there and kind of do a site assessment to kind of see what we're working with. So he's going to speak briefly about that.
So our boat launch site is located at approximately mile 33.4 on the Green River itself. It's about 1.5 acres in an area that has been used and is actively being used as a dumping site. So there's a lot of garbage, there's a lot of blackberries, there's a lot of cleanup that does need to be done. However, we have been able to we did notice when we were going through and taking kind of an inventory of what we had planted that there were some, we did have some spruces, conifers, willows planted right near the stream, and it did kind of have signs of a previous like installation, something that had been planned and taken into consideration. This site is, we have been able to we've assessed everything, and as soon as we are ready to break ground, when we have completed all of the cultural resources reviews are completed, we will be able to get out there and immediately start pulling out just an unbelievable amount of blackberries and garbage. So next, we're planning on going through cleaning up some of the trash, removing a lot of the invasive species that we have there, and we're focusing a lot more on mid-story and lower canopy outplanting as we are moving towards getting through this website, or not this website, but this location, this site. And just wanted to give you kind of who we're getting from to do all of our work. Thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you. Up next, we have Mary from Sand Solutions to speak on capacity building to advance Puget Sound habitat recovery goals.
Thank you very much. So I'm Mary Brigham, and I'm the Executive Director at Sound Salmon Solutions. Let's go in here. And, oh, okay, I see it's the older file. Okay, that works. Oh my. Okay, so this is a capacity building grant, and I'm going to give you a little overview of Sound Salmon Solutions first, so that you can see the differences that it's made for us. First of all, we're a nonprofit. We're one of the regional fisheries enhancement groups. There's 14 of us in the state. We were chartered by the legislature in 1990 to obviously work on salmon recovery through education and community outreach and habitat restoration. And our district, we each have a district, and so ours is the watersheds of the Stillaguamish River, the Snohomish River, which of course includes the Sky and the Snoqualmie, and South Whidbey Island and Camino Island. So we have basically all of Snohomish County, Northeast King, and parts of Island County. And So our, let me go back. Which one are you guys getting? Okay. And did you see the one of the regional fisheries enhancement groups? There's that one. Okay. Then that one. Okay. So basically, in our particular organization, we do habitat restoration and salmon rearing. We're a little unique as far as one of the RFEGs in that we have our own hatchery. It's a micro hatchery. We raise 80,000 coho a year there. We do the normal riparian work with vegetation removal, plantings. We started doing culvert assessments most recently as a part of a grant we were able to leverage with this HSIL grant. We have a really well-developed education program for one of the RFEGs in terms of our Salmon in the Schools program. We're in 26 different elementary schools. And we have a youth exploring stream science where we take first offenders with the Snohomish County Superior Court and provide them with outdoor learning. And we have a community action training school for adults and a Salish scientist summer camp. Obviously, we do volunteer plantings. We work a lot with different community groups. Why did we want an HSIL capacity building grant? Well, there's hundreds of fish barriers in our district in Snohomish County, hundreds and thousands, I would say, but there's many of them that have been assessed or a long time ago were assessed and need to be reassessed. There's also many that have not been reassessed and that aren't getting removed, that need to be removed. And we did not have the capacity to do that. We've been doing just riparian work for about the last decade. Sound Salmon used to do a lot of fish passage barrier removals. I don't know why. I've only been there 4.5 years, but they quit doing it about 10 years ago and just went into strictly riparian. So we needed to, we have a staffing deficit, first of all. We also have a knowledge and training and experience deficit in fish passage barrier removals, as well as an equipment deficit, and obviously the money to fund all those things. So HSIL has totally been a capacity builder for us and has been the solution, has been this grant, this award. And then we are also a partner with 6 other regional fisheries enhancement groups along the Puget Sound region for another HSIL grant. And then we were able to leverage a tremendous grant from the Tulalip tribe, which they have from NOAA, and they included a component for us for capacity building for them. And so you can see that HSIL's had an immediate impact for us. We were able to hire, with this HSIL grant that I'm speaking about today, we were able to hire an additional habitat project manager, a part-time habitat project coordinator, and a full-time grants manager. We've been able to subcontract with 4 other RFEGs who are very, very experienced in fish passage barrier removals, send our staff there for 2-day trainings, and they at each of these 4 places. And you might wonder, well, why do you want to go to 4 different places to learn fish passage barrier removal? Everybody does it differently, have different areas of expertise. I mean, we talked about permitting, contracting, overseeing construction projects, the whole gamut. And then we attended our regional biannual retreat for the RFEGs. We're here today, and then we're going to present at the American Fisheries Society conference in April in Wenatchee. We were also able to fund electronics and software, and we were able to purchase the RTV that you saw on the first slide. So this slide here is about our collaboration with the other RFEGs. We were able to hire a 0.8 habitat project manager and provide additional training for habitat project managers. This slide is about our Tulalip tribe capacity building grant. We were able to hire a 0.2 habitat project manager, part-time outreach coordinator, and then 2 culvert assessment techs. We've been able to provide training for all of our staff in the DFW culvert assessments and have a lot of mentoring from the Tulalip DNR staff. And they've provided a leased truck for us, for our staff, for the culvert assessments. So the outcomes are, we went from, at this point, the current outcomes are from 1 to 3 habitat project managers, from 1 to 2.5 habitat project coordinators, from 0 to 5 fish passage techs, 0 to 1 grant manager. Okay, and my time's up, right? you want me to go real quick? Okay, and then in terms of the training, we talked about the 2-day trainings that we've done. We were able to invite other habitat project managers across the state. So those trainings were actually provided to 30 different habitat project managers. And about 70 people attended the biannual RVG retreat. And we're here, and then we're doing the American fisheries. And then in terms of the equipment deficit, we funded the RTV as well as the truck and electronics. So now we are assessing 150 culverts for the Tulalip tribe, and we have been able to add so many more riparian projects with the additional habitat project managers. But we just recently submitted our first 2 applications for fish passage barrier removal projects. Thank you. Aria talks about that.
Thank you, Mary. Up next, we have Lisa from the Northwest Straits Foundation speaking to the Clayton Beach eelgrass restoration feasibility and design.
Okay, good morning. So my name is Lisa Kaufman. I'm the Director of Programs for the Northwest Straits Foundation. For those of you that might not know us, we are a small nonprofit, generally located out of Bellingham, but we work up and down the Sound, depending on the type of work we're doing. And because our name is confusing, in the next 6 months or so, you'll see a little rebranding going on. So look for a new name and new us. Well, same us. This project is a Clayton Beach eelgrass restoration. This is kind of one part of what has become a much larger project. And the HSIL funding has allowed us to really do a lot of investigation on the eelgrass elements of the project, which are now really becoming kind of a critical part of the overall restoration. That I'll kind of dive into the whole project. Our partners on the project are Washington Department of Natural Resources, state parks, as well as Western Washington University and Shannon Point Marine Center, and working really closely with our consulting team at Herrera Environmental, who's also considered kind of a partner, and it's the reason the project started, because we went out for a little kayak, one day as friends off work, and thought, oh, that project, we could do that. So I encourage everybody to take your recreation time out in the water and then discover your next restoration efforts. Good way to do it. So for those of you who may not be familiar with Clayton Beach, it's this very southern end of Larrabee State Park. So right on the edge of Whatcom and Skagit County, which I'll talk a little bit, hopefully at the end, is also right in the middle of a funding opportunity gap between 2 watershed, between the Nooksack watershed and the Skagit watershed that don't really fund work in the nearshore. So finding funding for this project from from the design phases all the way through implementation is challenging because we don't qualify for salmon money. And that giant blue circle is kind of the primary elements of this project, which is a gigantic hole in the ground. Subtitling. And it's also kind of some complexity because we have multiple landowners. Washington State Park, certainly as the park owner of Larrabee State Park. Puget Sound Energy owns the whole swath of where we have infrastructure that we're removing. DNR as kind of tideland bedland owners. Burlington Northern, not necessarily a landowner, but there's obviously the right of way or for the railroad. Upper Skagit Tribe owns some tidelands, and then at the very southern end, there's also one private property owner. So yeah, some challenges with all that, but we're working through it. So historically, this is a T sheet from back in like the late 1880s. Clayton Beach and this end of kind of Larrabee State Park, it was chuckanut sandstone, pretty much 100% chuckanut sandstone. But this little embayment here was present with a bit of a coastal, wetland kind of in there. There was bedrock outcrops of chuckanut sandstone that kind of contained the western end of the beach. And historically, it was a very narrow sand and gravel beach, probably most likely with landward steep forested slopes that you would see, typically throughout the northern regions of the Sound. And the primary sediment supply, was from the Sanish River, and likely at that time as well, probably also some sediments coming from the Skagit. And those rivers have completely been, diked, rerouted, and so this site does not have really any appreciable drift. One, because of the, technically it's, it's a rocky, historically it was a rocky shoreline, but also because of the lack of sediment supply anymore from the Sanish. So mentioned, the Puget Sound Energy as one of the landowners. the historic nature of this site when it was developed in the early 1900s, they basically built an electric trolley going from Bellingham down towards Mount Vernon. And the final, there's 4 miles of it that basically went right across the water. So for those of you that are familiar with Bellingham, if you've ever been on the interurban trail, the interurban trail basically was that rail corridor that then passed over at Clayton Beach, over the bay, and then went down across Sandwich Bay as well. In today's dollars, this would have been, it was $1 million back then to build this trestle, this electric trolley, which would equate probably to about $24 million today. So when you hear about the $6 to $9 million, amount that it takes to take it all out, just kind of a drop in the bucket, right? So there's some waiters outside you can put your money in. Restoration. But these historic photos actually led us to understanding a lot more about the site. When you're standing on the beach at Clayton Beach, it's a really sandy habitat, not necessarily what you would see at the toe of a Chuckanut sandstone type of area. So again, in 1912, they started developing this and actually crossed over what is now the BNSF rail line. Because the BNSF, wasn't what was historically the BNSF previously, wasn't available really for passengers or for, the general public. So they developed this trolley. Because of the development also of Chuckanut Road or Chuckanut Highway, as well as the invention of the car and the implementation of the car, it only lasted until about 1928. And for many other reasons as well, the trolley that was named the trolley that went to sea literally went to the sea a couple times. So likely most people were probably freaking out and didn't want to be on it anymore. And so, yeah, so it was a short-lived structure. Also, the pilings are not creosote treated. They're sort of right on that beginning of the edge of time when creosote was starting to be used. So the pilings were starting to deteriorate probably pretty rapidly from marine borers and other critters. And so this is kind of the historic photo that sort of got us really thinking, what is going on in this site? What you're seeing here is a suction dredge. And so we kind of started coupling this with the one aerial photo that you can see on the Coastal Atlas and on Google Earth that actually shows this sort of darker area, this outline that we discovered that other folks kind of knew outside of our work group existed as this deep area. It's a 13 to 14 acre dredged area that when they were developing these two parallel kind of rail lines, they blasted away at the Chuckanut sandstone and created a platform. And in order to fill in that platform, they suction dredged all the beach sediments out of the bottom of this hole. So these are all marine sediments and pumped them up onto the shoreline, recreating the slope. Rather than having sandstone, it's now literally sand. And as a result of doing that, they created a perched beach and they buried all the upper intertidal habitat as a result. And so this was also what we were kind of left with. Land or waterward of the trestle structure and all that fill material, they put about 1,300 linear feet of armor rock. Likely that was an afterthought, actually, because they were probably getting a lot of vibration in the pilings and structure. And so they put all this in to hold the sediment in place and keep it upside down and keep the structure in place. But what you can see here is that the eelgrass goes right up to the edge of the rock. And as you go further south where there is no rock, the eelgrass extends much further landward. So ultimately, this project is really a restoration project to get rid of all the shoreline infrastructure, fill the dredge hole, and restore eelgrass, and allow for eelgrass habitat to also expand landward with sea level rise, climate change impacts, and provide stability to the shoreline through the abatement effects of eelgrass. So to date, using a combination of our HSIL funding, as well as we have ESRP funding and a lot of other kind of private and other sources of funding, the HSIL funding has allowed us to do, actually we did the eelgrass surveys initially without the HSIL, but then came in and did other work as well. But so we've done with DNR, we've done eelgrass surveys, bathymetry surveys. We've developed a whole bunch of design alternatives. We've selected our preferred alternative for the restoration along the shoreline, as well as filling of the hole. We've got monitoring plans developed. The nearshore monitoring and eelgrass monitoring have been completed, at least for first phases. We've done sediment sampling, developed sediment sampling plans for the sediment sampling has occurred around the eelgrass edges of the hole, as well as we've done sediment analysis on the beach itself to look at chemical potential and see if we had any contaminants. There are none. We've got our permit level design ready to go. We're just kind of, continuing to do little refinements, basis of design report. We've had a pre-application meeting with regulatory agencies, and we've done several discussions. We've had several discussions with the regulators over time. Our partners at Western Washington University have developed these mesocosms in order to propagate eelgrass and determine the best methods of eelgrass propagation, as well as the best locations to get seed sources from. That's still kind of going. It's sort of an ongoing iterative process. And we've developed some upland vegetation management plans and have actually been working on getting rid of blackberry in anticipation of actually early action vegetation management on the shoreline. So again, there's kind of an idea, it gives an idea of the eelgrass mapping that you can see, big blank hole in the ground. The orange area is the nearshore restoration. One of the goals is to be able to use the rock that's on the shoreline as a layer in that hole. The hole goes down to about -20 or so. So it's a pretty deep hole in the ground that we need about 100,000 cubic yards of material. And we're hoping to create this as a beneficial reuse project where dredging activities that are going on around the sound or North Sound will end up bringing the materials there with more specificity for the top meter or so of the sediment in order to make sure that it's compatible with the surrounding eelgrass. Right, swim through this. So again, 2 phases of sediment sampling. These kind of show around the, you can see in the green, these are the sediment sampling sites around the eelgrass beds. And then up in the kind of brownish area up top, you can see the sediment sampling sites that were done on the nearshore beach sediments. So here's an example to kind of show you the mesocosms that were built. Some lovely, happy students because they get to work outside and play with eelgrass. We're really excited about this opportunity to kind of really look at, potential for eelgrass transplants as well as seeding. I know there's other eelgrass discussions going on today as well. And there's certainly a lot of collaborative efforts going on. Feel really grateful to be able to partner, of course, with DNR and their expertise and all of the, using their technology to do all the surveying, as well as helping with Western Washington and the eelgrass propagation. And so here's kind of our preferred alternative for the actual beach restoration. You can see there is one growing structure there. It was discovered in our surveys or our studies that the dredge hole is actually reflecting wave energy, increasing the wave energy onto the shoreline at the toe where BNSF is constantly dropping rock in order to minimize erosion there. And as a result, by filling the hole, we will reduce that erosion impact and allow BNSF hopefully to stop that. And so the groin is there because I mentioned earlier that there's really no appreciable drift anymore and there's no sediment sources that will maintain kind of the width of the beach. We're going to be bringing in a whole bunch of beach nourishment in order to have appropriate sediment for forage fish to spawn in. And it'll also maintain the width of the beach for the 800,000 people that go to Larrabee State Park every year that now use this beach quite a bit. It's always been a popular beach, but now you can actually get to it because there's now a bridge over the railroad, so you can safely get down to the shoreline. We've got a phased restoration plan that includes partially filling the hole initially before we start really doing any of the restoration. Because again, if we leave the hole unfilled, but we do all the restoration, removing all the rock, removing pilings, removing structures, we're just going to increase the rate of erosion on the beach. That was an afterthought that we kind of had, oh yeah, we probably need to do that first. And so this is sort of the, kind of a phased effort of partially filling it, putting the rock in. So getting an initial layer of sediment, putting the rock in, and then filling it back up, and then waiting for it to actually settle out, making sure that it's smooth before we actually plant the eelgrass. So it could be anywhere from 5 to 7 years after we actually finish the restoration that we get into the elements of actually eelgrass restoration. And this is out of my element of expertise, but our partners at DNR, this is just some examples of ways that are planning for how you actually would transplant and seed for restoration of eelgrass. We're really excited because it's definitely going to contribute to the goals of restoration of 100 acres or whatever it is of eelgrass around the sound. And it's not just the 13 acres or 14 acres of the dredge hole. By removing all that rock, we're expecting a huge expansion, natural recruitment of that eelgrass landward from where it is now. And so our next steps, again, we're looking to submit our permit applications. One, mostly to get a lot of answers to some of the questions we still have, like can we put the rock in the hole? And also figuring out kind of that confluence of bringing in sediment from beneficial reuse. And as I kind of mentioned already, acquiring funding is definitely something that we need to figure out, and hoping that by putting the rock in the hole, we'll save about $3 million. And by partnering with beneficial reuse, we'll hopefully save on a lot of those transportation costs as well. But again, waiters outside. There we go. And that's all our huge amounts of funding opportunity or funders that have helped us get to this point.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. I love hearing about the hole. It's always so great to hear. Buy at home.
Buzzword around now.
Yes. Awesome. Up next, we have Charlotte from Suquamish Tribe of Indians, speaking about habitat restoration project development and implementation. Good morning, everyone. Damari introduced my title so nicely. It's very long, so I will skip that part. And I'm just wondering, does this have a laser pointer on it? Maybe I'll test it out. Oh, no. Anyway, that's fine. I'll carry on. So this the HSIL sub-award funds staff capacity for the Stillaguamish Tribe of Indians, a disproportionately impacted community, and allows the tribe to implement their vision for salmon and watershed recovery. And part of that vision is land acquisition and restoration of habitat for salmon. And in our HSIL sub-award, we have 3 primary tasks. It's the acquisition and restoration development, and restoration, development and implementation as well, and our broader communication task. Just a quick slide to orient folks to the location of the Stillaguamish watershed if you're not familiar. It's located in Snohomish County. The major towns are Arlington, Darrington, Granite Falls, and Stanwood. They're towns, they're pretty small, so very rural. And then depending on traffic, where the tribe's headquarters are located in Arlington, which is about like 50 minutes north of Seattle. So the HSIL sub-award supports salmon recovery in the Stillaguamish watershed by allowing tribal staff providing the capacity to implement the Stillaguamish watershed acquisition strategy. And this strategy provides guidance to the stakeholders in the watershed and allows them to prioritize land acquisitions along the major Chinook-bearing waters in the Stillaguamish. It also supports tribe capacity to implement the Stillaguamish chapter of the Puget Sound Chinook Recovery Plan. So this plan describes 6 habitat limiting factors impacting Chinook populations and outlines the work needed to restore these habitats to recover our threatened Chinook populations. So I'm going to jump right into our main tasks and our accomplishments that we've completed so far with the HSIL sub-award. And this is our acquisition task. And as I just mentioned, it allows us to implement that acquisition strategy I just talked about. So acquisitions, there's a lot of due diligence that comes with acquiring land. We have to do site visits, we do landowner outreach, we have to get appraisals, and the funds that fund our acquisitions require a variety of grant deliverables. So the Recreation Conservation Office and Floodplains by Design fund the majority of the tribe's acquisitions. And in order to get reimbursed for the acquisitions, you have to provide those grant deliverables. So this HSIL sub-award allows the tribe to do that. And then once the land is acquired, it is deed restricted and protected in perpetuity for salmon recovery. And so far with the HSIL sub-award, the tribe acquired 5 properties. That's across 115 acres. And that's along 1.2 miles of shoreline along the North Fork, Stillaguamish, and Maidstone. And here's a really pretty photo of one of the properties the tribe acquired. So this is on the North Fork, Stillaguamish, looking upstream at Whitehorse Mountain, which is close to the town of Darrington. And this was actually a cool project to work on because this property was owned by the Department of Natural Resources, and they transferred that land to the tribe. And this is that same property. It has just a really nice off-channel beaver wetland complex, so a really great piece of property to protect in perpetuity for salmon habitat. Okay, so our restoration, development, and implementation task. Again, the HSIL Award provides the staff capacity to implement these large-scale restoration projects, applying for permits, contract management with our engineers and our construction contractors, working with the utility districts to remove their utilities. And so just it really provides the capacity and support to implement these projects through to construction. So this is the first project that I'll talk about is the Tri-Zissaba 2 Tidal Wetland Restoration Project. It was restored in 2025, so last summer. It was about $11 million construction project. A lot of state funding, federal funding. See my grant manager right there helping get us that funding. And so this estuary restoration project, the goal is to restore estuary habitat, which is a habitat limiting factor for Chinook identified in the plan. And just briefly, it's a 230-acre property. We restored 2 miles of shoreline along the main stem Stillaguamish and Port Susan Bay. And then on top of that, about 10 miles of tidal channels were excavated. We removed 1 mile of power lines. Over 42,000 square feet of buildings were demolished and removed. And then about 265,000 cubic yards of material was excavated and hauled. So the orange is outlining the 230-acre footprint. And then it says HSIL on the bottom here. That's the main stem of the Stillaguamish. And then at the top of the slide, that's the Nature Conservancy's Port Susan Bay project. And then just off the screen is Port Susan Bay. So this is mid-construction. You can see the various sizes of tidal channels that are being excavated, and the design is meant to mimic reference marshes. And then here on the kind of the bottom of your screen, that's HSIL, the main stem Stillaguamish River levee. And then this larger channel that you can see in kind of the center of the screen, that's a large distributary channel. And then on the Nature Conservancy's Port Susan Bay project, you can see the sea dike is still intact, but the intention of the project is to connect large distributary channels and basically make the sites into one. So this is in January of this year. So you can see an incredible amount of wood has been deposited. The levees are gone, and that big distributary channel is connected. And I'll just mention, we didn't install any wood. This is all naturally recruited. Here's another photo mid-project. Again, just illustrating the various sizes of tidal channels. The river levee, that is the main stem Stillaguamish at the top of the screen. And it's a little hard to see, but in the background, the tribe also built a 1 mile setback levee to protect the neighbors from reintroducing the river and the tides. And this is again in January, just showing the development of the tidal channels. The levees are gone and the water is back. The next project the HSIL award allowed the tribe to complete is the Tracton Floodplain Restoration Project. This project addresses the floodplain, riparian, and large wood limiting factors in our Chinook recovery plan. It's a $14 million construction project. We began construction last year. We'll finish this year if all goes well. And this was a partnership with Snohomish County. So once it's all restored, it will be 230 acres, 2 miles of shoreline on the North Fork Stillaguamish, remove 500 feet of power lines, remove 500 square feet of buildings. Last summer, we installed about 20 large engineered log jams, hauled about 300,000 cubic yards of material with a little bit more to go this summer. And then our riparian crew, with the support of Washington's Conservation Corps, they knocked it out of the park with installing plants after our construction season. And they finished, I think, a couple weeks ago. So it's pretty cool. 18,000 plants. It's amazing. Oh, did I skip the slide? No, I didn't. Okay, so this is the tribe's property, North Fork Still-Quamish, before restoration. This is mid-project last summer. The contractor excavated a side channel. It's a little bit hard to see. There are log jams in the side channel. And then this summer, the contractor will remove, there's a levee in between the North Fork Still-Quamish and that side channel that will be lowered, reconnect the North Fork Still-Quamish to the floodplain. And what we'll be installing more log jams this summer as well. This is one of those log jams at the end of the summer last year. Some of you might know that's Jason Griffith. He's the tribe's environmental program manager. He's like, yeah, the lead on these projects. So I'm just happy to help support the implementation of these projects. And then this is the log jam and Jason on top of it. He likes to climb things, if you didn't know that. But so it accumulated an incredible amount of wood, which is great for salmon at all life stages. And then our third project that we're working on is the Cicero Floodplain Restoration Project. Similar elements to the Trafton Floodplain Restoration Project. We're in progress right now. We've removed 2,000 feet of power lines, removed 8,000 square feet of buildings. Final designs are nearly complete. We're working hard on writing grants for construction funding. So if we're successful, hopefully we'll go to construction next year, fingers crossed. Still need to get all of our permits. And once that's restored, it would restore 130 acres of floodplain and 1.2 miles of North Fork Still-Quamish. And you can see this is near the tribe's Cicero property, not a stick of wood. So one of the goals would be to change that. And for our final task in this HSIL sub-award accomplishments to date, we've held 2 formal site tours last summer where we hosted representatives from legislative districts 10 and 39, and then other various agency partners and regulators, just to share, what the tribe is up to as far as salmon recovery goes. And then we also hosted Department of Natural Resources Commissioner Dave Upthegrove at the tribe's Trafton floodplain property, because their state-owned aquatic lands there. So that was a good opportunity to share what the tribe's doing. One more minute. I think I'm doing good. And then as you saw, we were able to collect drone imagery. The HSIL award supported that, which is great for presentations, but also just awesome for evaluating project, evolution and effectiveness. And then of course it lets us attend these HSIL summits and just share, the tribe's approach to salmon recovery. So next steps, we're working on an acquisition right now, 10 acres on the North Fork. We'll look for future opportunities, cruise Zillow here now and then. Restoration, again, I just talked about Cicero, finalize the designs, apply for permits, hopefully get our construction funding, select a qualified contractor and build that project. And then for our broader communication task, we have 1 site tour planned so far this summer in May for our regulators and grant corps. And then this award will be expended next, maybe even before the end of the performance period. So we'll work on seeking additional funding to support this work. Just quickly, the HSIL award, as you saw, allows the tribe to work on a large scale to connect a corridor of lands from spawning grounds to tidewaters to not only restore natural processes, but enhance the tribe's treaty rights and achieve salmon recovery goals. Just quick summary, again, the tribe acquired with this HSIL award over 100 acres. We'll hopefully restore 460 acres this summer, and then with 130 on the docket. And that's it. And that's me.
Great, thank you, Charlotte. Lastly, we have Kelly from Lumi Nation to speak about her 2 projects.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk about 2 HSIL awards that I have. So I have a very long title. I'm the Watershed Restoration Manager for Lummi Nation. And my 2 HSIL projects, the first is Expediting South Fork Nooksack Projects in response to Chinook crisis. And then the second is Nooksack Watershed Habitat Restoration Project Development and Implementation. So I first wanted to give a little bit of a background about Lummi Nation. The Lummi people are the salmon people with 6,000 enrolled members. and their well-being and culture are bound with the health of salmon stocks. They're the largest fishing tribe in the Puget Sound, and Lummi Nation are co-managers of fisheries resources in the Nooksack watershed, along with the Nooksack Indian tribe and the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. The goal of both of our projects is to increase the pace and scale of habitat restoration to recover ESA-listed Chinook salmon in the South Fork and Middle Fork Nooksack River watersheds. And our habitat goals are to recover habitat to properly functioning conditions to support our salmon recovery targets. So our early Chinook abundance for our two Nooksack populations are far below the historical numbers and recovery goals. The two distinct early Chinook populations in the Nooksack River are to the furthest away is the North Fork, Middle Fork early Chinook, and then the South Fork early Chinook. And you can see our recovery goals are 14,000 returning adults and 9,900. And back in 2004, the numbers were about 210 and 233. That was the time that the recovery plan was developed. We also experienced an unprecedented pre-spawn mortality event of over 2,400 adult South Fork Nooksack Chinook in September 2021. That was caused by high water temperatures, poor in-stream habitat, and low flows. 72% of early Chinook returning to the South Fork died before they could spawn. And there also have been significant pre-spawn mortality events every year since, though not nearly at the same level. So our habitat restoration projects are guided by the WIRA 1 Salmonid Recovery Plan that identifies priority geographic areas and restoration strategies to provide the greatest benefit for salmon recovery. And much of our efforts have focused on addressing the root cause of inadequate habitat, which is namely the lack of large stable log jams that maintain habitat forming processes in the Nooksack River. And so project monitoring has shown that these ELJ projects that we have completed have been effective at increasing habitat diversity. They're effective at developing pools with woody cover. They're effective at engaging side channel and floodplain habitats where that's a project objective. And that from snorkel surveys, we found that adult and juvenile Chinook prefer these ELJ formed pools. And this photo, you see these two circles, you see salmon are using one of the engineered log jams on the South Fork, and then nearby in the riffle, you can see that lighter gravel, which are our salmon reds. So the first HSIL project that I'm talking about today is in partnership with the Nooksack Indian tribe. Lummi Nation is serving as a lead partner, and then we're working closely with Nooksack. And this project increases both tribes' capacity to plan reach scale restoration projects in the South Fork Nooksack watershed. Project tasks include capacity for project implementation, for advancing projects through landowner outreach and design, to develop recommendations for floodplain wetland restoration on the lower South Fork and to prioritize these projects, to work on Clomer and Lomer restoration permit streamlining through the FEMA process, and also completing lower South Fork hydraulic modeling. So I'm going to go over some accomplishments from this first grant. We've done a lot of landowner outreach, project design. Let me get into the heart of it rather than reading that list. So between January of 2024 and December 2025, we've conducted landowner outreach for two South Fork projects. We've completed 8 community workshops and site visits, and we've had 36 attendees participate in these events. In January of this year, Lummi and Nooksack hosted the South Fork Nooksack Fish and Flood Forum. It was to improve community understanding of riverine processes and also the restoration work that we are doing, and to build relationships. Over 30 community members and residents of the South Fork Nooksack Valley attended. And we had over 20 partners from the tribes, Whatcom County, Nooksack Salmon Enhancement Association, the Whatcom Conservation District, and the Whatcom Land Trust. It was really to kind of connect everybody with the work that's going on in the South Fork. And we've completed preliminary designs for 1 project on the South Fork and are advancing design development for 2 more projects. The Nooksack tribe developed a memo of recommendations for integrating in-stream restoration projects with floodplain reconnection and habitat restoration. And they updated the prioritization matrix for the South Fork projects in conjunction and partnership with the Wire One Salmon Recovery staff team. For the Nooksack floodplain permit streamlining process, 6 planned or recently completed tribal projects intersect the South Fork FEMA floodway, which is shown on this map, and are subject to FEMA's no rise requirement. And the Nooksack tribe convened a local work group that was focused on finding solutions. We've held 29 work group meetings over the last couple of years. We've contracted with an engineering team and also an attorney to develop a draft report summarizing the recommendations to improve and expedite the floodplain permitting and remapping process. Work group members include federal, tribal, county, and state staff, along with engineering consultants as needed. We have all the partners listed here. And since the change in the administration, we've had limited FEMA engagement in the work group, but early on, the intention was to be working closely with FEMA on developing solutions. As part of the floodplain permit streamlining work group, the engineering consultant is developing an integrated hydraulic model to be used across project reaches, providing efficiency for current and future design projects. And the modeling will advance development of a unified 2D hydraulic model for the FEMA floodway in the lower South Fork. So the second HSIL grant I'm going to talk about is being led by Lummi Nation alone, and it's titled Nooksack Watershed Habitat Restoration Project Development and Implementation. And it's a capacity grant, and it includes several project tasks, including funding tribal staff time for attending and presenting at conferences, fundraising and implementation of habitat restoration projects, and training to improve and increase programmatic capacity for river restoration. And the project will also fund engineering consultants to develop recommendations for integrating floodplain wetland restoration on the upper South Fork. So kind of taking that work that we did in the lower South Fork and expanding that into the upper South Fork. The agreement was finalized in June of 2025, but in this short time, we've already had multiple accomplishments. Staff attended and presented at the 2025 Tribal Habitat Conference and the 2026 River Restoration Northwest Symposium. We presented to Northwest Indian College students about an internship opportunity to support the restoration division. We've applied to 5 grant programs to support the South Fork Nooksack restoration projects. Restoration staff have attended or registered for Portland State University's river restoration courses and River Restoration Northwest courses. And our next steps for these projects include to finalize that South Fork Nooksack floodplain permit streamlining work group report. We currently have the draft under review, to complete the hydraulic modeling for the lower South Fork, to finish completing preliminary designs, to get the engineer under contract for developing those upper South Fork floodplain and wetland restoration recommendations, to hire a Lummi Nation intern and seasonal technicians for project construction, and to apply for more grant funding. And both Lummi and Nooksack's watershed restoration programs are 100% grant funding. And I always like to share that I currently manage over 30 grants to keep my program running and to advance these projects. And capacity funding is extremely difficult to find. And so the HSIL program has really provided us with the flexibility to support fundraising for these huge restoration projects, to attend conferences, to let my staff and give my staff opportunities for training and project planning and landowner outreach and development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Yeah, I think we have time for questions. What I might do is ask if anyone has a question to raise their hand, and I'll pass you the microphone to speak into it for those that are attending online. And then I will run over and kind of just pick and choose from those in the front 2 tables who would like to respond to the question, unless it's directed to a specific presenter.
Hi, I had a quick question for you for the last presentation.
Yes.
For the fish and floodplains forum that you did, you said that you had about 30 people show up. Was that about how many you were expecting? Were you expecting more or less? And then how did you get that information out to the community?
That's a good question. I was pleasantly surprised about, wait, I'm gonna spin this way. About how many people attended from the community. I was like, it's gonna be so overloaded with practitioners, like restoration practitioners, because we had 20 people there. The way we got the word out is so, both tribes, we work with the same outreach consultant, and we do a lot of outreach in the South Fork Valley to advance projects. Most of the projects that we do on the river, it's not adjacent to tribal property. So we have to get all the landowner participation. So we've already been working with a lot of folks. And then there's the Acme Van Zant subzone, which is kind of funded in part through Whatcom County. And so we got the word out through them. So it was like sending out postcards, getting people on listservs, calling people up, just putting stuff up on Facebook. So it took a lot of we spent months trying to kind of advertise for it, and we were really happy that people came out. We had a raffle, so we had food. entice the folks. Thanks.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, so if you're tribal folks, I'm a Snoqualmie tribe, and something that's really interesting with the land acquisitions piece of this is combining these restoration priorities and floodplains specifically for some of my work with cultural access. And so I wanted to ask, whatever you can share today, how do you balance that in some of this work? And then also, how do you communicate that with members of the public as well?
That's a great question. So, from the Stillaguamish tribe perspective, the board of directors, they've guided us that, like, yes, go forth and acquire lands. And there is that balance of these lands are acquired with public funds. So with that comes certain strings, and public access is permitted and allowed on lands that are acquired with these grant funds. So there is a balance, and the tribe supports public access, but there is some, if we run into issues with, people not treating the property appropriately for salmon recovery purposes, then we can restrict access in coordination with our funders. So the Natural Resources Department that I work in, we work pretty closely with the tribe's Cultural Resources Department. So maybe we don't do the best job in always communicating with them on the properties that the tribe is acquiring for the purposes of salmon recovery. But, and I think the funders that, support this work and that are supporting the tribes, they're well aware that these properties are not, they're also for hunting and within the regulations, of course, but foraging. And so I feel like it's a really supportive program as far as, cultural resources and salmon recovery. Our former fisheries manager and chairman, he's like, natural resources or cultural resources. And so he always just, ingrained that in us. And so I feel like it's just open communication. Tribal members are allowed to fish, hunt, and gather on the properties that the tribe is acquiring with public funds. And yeah, we haven't had any major issues in conflict to date. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it. I think we have time for like one more. Hearing none. I first want to thank all of the presenters today for speaking on their projects. It's always great. Lily and I work a lot with all of you, but it's always great to hear how projects are progressing and seeing the development from statement of work negotiation all the way to implementation, and then once a project ends, where it goes. And so exciting to see and hear next steps for a lot of these projects after HSIL funds are all expended and used. So I want to give a round of applause to everyone that presented today. You guys might be hungry, so I might give you guys some more information on eating and next steps. So lunch will be served in the river room. So in the grand hall where you guys were just in, the river room is, from my point of view, when you look at the big stage, you turn around and there's like that giant garage door. The river room will be right there. So in the main area that you were in earlier this morning, in the back of the grand hall. For you guys to know, the tables in the center of the hall are for everyone. If you requested a special diet, let's say vegan, vegetarian, etc., please visit the tables on the side of the room. We have limited amount of food for those individuals, so please save that for those that might have requested that when they registered for the event today. And if you are presenting in the afternoon session, please arrive at your assigned room at 1:20 and meet your session moderator then. The afternoon concurrent sessions will begin promptly at 1:30. After the concurrent sessions today, we'll conclude with a panel discussing building and sustaining partnerships and programs in the Grand Hall. Be really exciting, lots of fun stuff to talk about. So yeah, thank you all again. And lunch will start exactly at 12:25. So if you guys want to just head on down early, if you want to talk to the presenters, go ahead and catch them now. But it was great. Thank you all so much.